Hey everyone, we're going to do story time. And today's story that we're going to read is called Howard B. WiggleBottom Learns to Listen. Howard B. WiggleBottom Learns to Listen by Howard Binkow and Susan F. Cornelison. Meet Howard B. WiggleBottom. Howard is almost always in trouble at school because, well, Howard just doesn't listen. During story time, instead of quietly listening, Howard bounces around the room. Howard B. WiggleBottom, please sit down, be quiet, and listen. But Howard doesn't listen. Howard B. WiggleBottom, you are bouncing too close to the fan. But Howard doesn't listen. At lunchtime, his friends try to warn him. Hey, Howard, watch your step. But Howard doesn't listen. After lunch, Howard's friend tries to tell him something important. Blah, 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 blah. But Howard doesn't listen. On the playground, Howard's teammates try to help him. Keep your eye on the ball, Howard! Boink! But Howard doesn't listen. In the art room, the teacher reminds the class, kids, try to keep the paint on your paper. But Howard doesn't listen, so the teacher asks him to take a timeout. He feels sad. Howard does not like being alone and in trouble. He thinks and thinks about his day. Howard makes up his mind. From that moment on, he will try very hard to be the best listener he can be. The next day, Howard does listen during story time. He waits for his turn to talk and then asks a question about the story. Howard gets a big star because Howard is really listening. While walking home, Howard uses both his eyes and ears to help stay safe. Howard is really listening. Please hang up your backpack and clean up your room now. When Howard gets home, he listens to his mother. Okay, Mom. Howard is really listening. So Howard gets extra time to play and have fun. Awesome ears, Howard! Time for a bedtime story. Please brush your teeth first, Howard. Howard B. WiggleBottom is really listening. Almost all of the time. Well, that's the story for today. I hope you guys liked it.
Wow, Mr. McCallum. You know what that story reminded me of? Last week's social skill. Do you guys remember the steps for last week's social skill? Do you remember what last week's social skill was? Last week's social skill was listening. What are the steps for listening? Let's practice them one more time. Step 1, look at the person who is talking and remain quiet. Step 2, wait until the person is finished talking before you speak. Step 3, show that you heard the person by nodding your head, saying, okay, or that's interesting. Wow, I really like how the story that you read, Mr. McCallum, reminded me of the social skills, because sometimes I need to remember the steps for listening, just like I'm sure some of our students need to remember the steps for listening too.
Great job reading that story, Mr. McCallum. I loved all the different voices you used for the characters. I bet Harold B. Wigglebottom learned why it's so important to listen. Maybe he can follow the steps Mrs. Womack reminded us of.